Hi, welcome to this video, the first of hopefully many in this playlist, where I'm going to attempt to try and create a bookkeeping program using the coding skills that I have in a way that perhaps it will teach you how to get the fundamentals of writing an application. Now, there's a lot of sort of starter projects out there like to-do apps and other hello world things that you can do. This isn't one of those. In fact, unlike the asteroids games that we've been coding in the past, this is probably more nearer towards intermediate than it is beginner. So this is for those of you who perhaps, if you're a beginner, you can follow along and attempt this, but there's going to be a few assumed things, like you're going to have certain codes and setups on your computer in order to do this. So it might be how you host websites, how you develop websites locally on your machine. How are you already able to do that? Are you able to bring in packages using package managers and other things like that, other add-ons that are needed in order to code. So this is a series of videos to build this, because these coding and bookkeeping are two things that I've dealt with in depth over the years. And to be able to bring them together in this way, in a tutorial form, I think will be really good for me as well as for other people who want to watch. Just to show you how much of an interest I've had in this. So this is my 123 reg, and this is a domain called smallaccounts.co.uk. And as you can see, I registered this in 2001. That is when I first started thinking about the idea of coding my own accounts program. Now, it never happened. I just never got round to it. I didn't have any of the acumen or the professional experience or anything at all to bring this to fruition. So it just stuck with me as a domain that I thought one day I could do something with it. And happy to say that I'm going to use it as the basis to create a fully fledged accounting program that runs on the web. So but this is more of an intermediate level application. It's not like the asteroids ones that we've done on the other ones in Node. So because of that, there's a few things I'm just going to run through briefly now that will be needed in order for this to work. So you'll notice if I bring up my terminal, we are using something called Valet. So this is a library, or a sort of a framework that sits. It's specifically for Mac computers, though. We'll come on to the other computers in a minute. So this Laravel Valet is it's a means of being able to host websites on your local computer without getting too bogged down with the setup of everything. So by installing Valet, I can run Laravel based websites. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating this in Laravel. Laravel is a PHP framework. PHP, if we search Google, it's probably the most used web server software at the minute, or it's close to, if not the highest. It's a very popular language in web development. Whether it'll be the same in 5-10 years, I don't know, but it's very popular now. And Laravel is a framework that sits on top of it. It uses a methodology called Model View Controller, MVC. You may have heard of that acronym. And we'll go through all of that. Or we'll go through some of that, because we're not going to create it as a full-blown MVC. I'll come to that a bit later as well. So this is Laravel, and Valet is the framework that allows us to run it as a local website, and you'll see that in a minute, or in the next video when we start the installation process. If you are on a Linux machine, what you can do is use an alternative version of this. Kinix, just made a new word up there. So this is a port of that Valet that runs on Linux. So whether if you're on Raspberry Pi, I think it works, Ubuntu, Debian, those packages, this will run. I've had this running on a Linux machine at one place where I was working at one time, and it works and it does the job. So that's your alternative for Linux. But what about Windows? Well, Windows 10 now recently has started to introduce the idea of a Linux subsystem. So you might be able to get that Linux package on there. But if not, Windows comes built in with IIS. So that might be something that you're already familiar with using. If you're not using IIS, you might be using something called WAMP, which is another way of saving websites. If you're not using WAMP, you could look for alternatives. But this is partly why I'm saying that this is an intermediate level sort of tutorial, because I'm not going to go into the details of all these things. I'm just going to show you that I'm doing it on Laravel Valet. And if you follow the instructions on here, the installation, it's very straightforward if you're on a Macintosh. As I say, you can, if you don't know the types of computer, feel free to look around. But we're going to be using Laravel Valet. Okay, so what else are we going to be using? So we're using Laravel, we're using Valet, so that means we're going to be using MySQL as the database. Now Valet, in fact, Brew is another package manager specifically for Mac, by the way. Again, as an intermediate, you may already have this installed on your computer. So Valet installs MySQL, I think, or it tells you how to do it in the instructions. Yeah, it does there, you can see it there in the screen. Nginx, which is the web server itself. PHP, which is the interpreter for the PHP language, which is what we're going to use for all the logic. And this DNS mask. Now don't worry too much about that, but just suffice to say, it allows us to not have to eat. When we did the Asteroids game, we either you had to put localhost with the port number, or we had to use an IP like 192.168. something and then colon 3000 or whatever it was. DNS mask just allows us to set up a more domain-like name for our local server, even though it's sitting on our machine here locally. But you'll see that once the installation is done. So there's some of the things that we're going to be needing to get going. In order to install anything PHP related, we ideally would install a program called Composer. Composer is a package manager for PHP in the same way that npm is a package manager for Node and the JavaScript stuff that comes with Node. So we need to install that. You can just download it here and follow the instructions. It will tell you what to do. There's a few commands you run in the command line. Again, I'm expecting a level of competency here that will be deemed intermediate, so I'm not going to go into details on this. But if you follow the basic installation instructions, you should be fine. If you are using Brew, you can install it. If you do Brew search Composer, so it should be something, yeah, so the tick means I've installed it this way. So you could then just simply type in Brew install Composer, and that'll install Composer for you globally on your Mac. While we're here, actually, we could search. I think I installed Valet through Brew. In fact, I think on Valet, yeah, it requires Brew anyway to install Valet if you're going to use the Mac version. I don't know if you can install it without Brew, but this seems to suggest you have to install it via Brew. So that's what I've done. So as you can see, I've done a search for Valet. No casts. Oh, okay. So no. So Valet wasn't. Valet was through the Composer system. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, follow them instructions. There's plenty of tutorials for installing this on YouTube. I'm not going to go into the details of these things. So once we've got Laravel up and running through Valet, we'll have MySQL for the database. With regards to frameworks, we can then sort of go on from there. That'll give us the basics. But we're going to treat this as two separate code packages. We're going to have a back end, which is Laravel, and a front end, which we're going to use Vue. VueJS, which we used in our asteroids one, the first asteroids playlist. And the reason for that is I want to decouple the two, because if we have a back-end server, which is Laravel, and then we run our Vue client, we can put that as like a website. But then we might in the future want to create an app, an actual app that goes onto the App Store. Well then, because we don't have that built-in client into the website, we can. So long as it talks to the back end the same way that the Vue.js app talks to the back end, we can stick it in an app. We could even provide an interface for other websites, like a sales website, so that whenever it places an order, whenever an order is placed on a website, it could immediately fire a request into our code, into our accounting website, and automatically add that in as part of the process. And we can do that. As long as it follows the same protocols as all the other front ends, there's no reason why I can't do that. So that's why I want to decouple the front end from the back end. I want to treat them as completely separate entities that just happen to be talking to one another. And we'll see that more in detail as we go on. So that's hopefully where we're going to be. That's how we're going to start. So I think the best thing to do now is to end this introductory video, and then we'll start on the actual installation process.